coaching. I'm going to grab my pen because I'm going to take some notes of what you say to me in response to what I ask of you. And as Brian has kind of intimated, coaching is not a new concept. It is not a new concept to ministry, but being intentional about it may be new. And helping our church planters to see the need and the value of coaching is vital. I am doing a church plant because of a coach. I came here, and breaking into church planting is the hardest thing that I've done in the past almost 10 years in Puget Sound. I came in as the executive director, which is the DOM role, and people wanted me to be a pastor to pastors. Said, you know, I care about people, but I don't want to live my life caring about people in a nurturing kind of way. I'm here for evangelism and gospel ministry. And that's best done in churches that start new groups and in churches that start new churches. And so it was really difficult for me to break into the church planting because of the role and the assignment that I had. And I have a tutor in Oxford, England. He's the former president, now the systematic theology professor at Regis Park College there. And he's one of the top guys in the world for who he is and what he does. And I'm very honored that someone of that stature has time for me every time I go. And Paul said to me, he said, Ron, as I listen to you, you don't fit your formal title and what the denomination probably wants you to do. I said, you're right, you're listening to me well. He said, what you want to do is to plant a church. You're right, I want to see churches planted. But you don't want to plant the churches that your denomination wants you to plant. I said, you've been reading my mail, you're looking deeply into my heart. And so we had this tutor relationship that led into coaching, and then he came back and he kind of gave me an assessment. He said, Ron, what you want to do is what I would like you to do, and that is to not just see churches planted, but for you to actually participate in planting churches, and not just planting churches, but planting churches for the community, but planting the church with the community. And so we figured out that God was leading us into downtown Seattle, not to plant a church for the community, but to plant a church with the community. At first we thought we'd do that through the Red Cross, and that hasn't quite gone the way we wanted. And so now we're doing common cause groups downtown, which has got the attention of people that are entirely different from us. And so I credit one of the more important things in my life the past 10 years by my tutor coaching me. And as I look back, the most significant times that I've had of decision have been with God in prayer, but have been based on relationships with people who have been coaching me in business and in ministry. So I really, really believe in coaching as the glue that kind of holds everything together. And so we have developed, as your regional team, a concept and an approach that is really an outworking of what Gary, Brian, and Ron have heard all their lives that has worked for them, and that coincides with what the denomination wants and has got the attention of the more promising church planters, and has got the attention of the more seriously committed partners, where we form a team to come around a church planter that is likely to see that planter succeed. This is what I've observed over the years around the world, that the better pastors in established churches have a great team of people around them that are different from them, speaking truth into their lives. As I think about the men of God around the world whom God is using in unusual ways, whether it's big numbers or not, they have around them a team of people that are really helping them on multiple levels. Here's the problem with the church planter. whether he parachutes in or if he's raised up here locally, the church planter is kind of out there with his hand-picked team who is like him, and they already agree with everything he wants to do, and he lacks the resource of people who are on the perimeter, the outside, looking in, who have an appropriate knowledge and relationship to help him. And so we have concluded that what others before us, who are smarter than we are, have concluded, that every person, particularly every church planter, needs to have a team around them that they haven't handpicked of their family or their best friends. And so we have developed what I'm going to present to you, we're going to focus on in this session, our comprehensive team of how we can essentially ensure the success of a church planter if all the other pieces are in place and he accepts this approach. So if you look at the top of the page, again, coaching is part of our team approach. It is designed to support our planters, and we believe that we can demonstrate that this approach will help the planter discover and stay on God's preferred path. Some of our planters start better than they continue, and they don't finish as well. And one of the things that we do in this process is help the planter face reality. For example, our Western mindset says that we deserve pain-free and trouble-free lives. For some reason, we in Christian ministry still believe that falsehood. Jesus was crucified. You know, a servant is not greater than his master. Jesus was harassed and harangued and threatened and persecuted, and so were the apostles. And so for us to have the hope even, as well as the expectation that this is going to go easy and go well, that simply is not true. I don't know about for you men, but every person that I know who has done something measurable and we're talking about for the kingdom of God, every person that I know has multiple stories of great difficulty, and they stayed engaged and on their mission field. They didn't run away from it, but they stayed engaged on their mission fields. We want to help people understand that life can be tough. And so this affects our attitudes and can create a pattern to find ways of serving God inside boundaries set by the aims of self-protection if we're just trying to protect ourselves. And so we think that it's normal for planters to experience frustration, disappointment, sickness, conflict, persecution, danger, and stress. I think that that's normal. For Patty and for me, a good week is where we were not traumatized more than 2 or 3 days of that week. A good month for me is when I only have one major church conflict where I'm drawn in and somebody takes a shot at me for either what you wanted me to do that I did not do, or me doing something they did not want me to do. I mean, that's just ministry in this day and time. And so if you're not being challenged and stretched and persecuted and going through things, we have to kind of wonder. And so we have to help planters face that, understand that, and deal with that. And so we need a team to come around them to help them. And so over the years, we have found that ministry supervision has moved from one person being an uncle or a father or a grandfather figure to the leader, to needing a team of people around them. And we now believe that different people with different roles and relationships are vital to the success of our planters. Again, success not being defined by numbers and dollars, although we see that as a byproduct, but success as being defined by their faithfulness and their obedience. And so what we have concluded is that these actually four people give a planter the greatest chances for success. And so we're going to talk about these four people. A supervisor, a coach, a mentor, and a catalyst. Now the supervisor, we think, is best done by being somebody outside the plant. in order for the planter to be clearly the leader of that plant, we want to be careful who's in authority over that planter, because the planter needs to set the agenda and the direction. And so we see a supervisor as somebody providing accountability with a focus on agreed upon goals that are largely drafted by the planter himself. Right now, I'm waiting for feedback from one of the top men in the nation. He worked for Boeing Rockwell in the DARPA, the Black Ops project. He is a neighbor and a friend, and I have enlisted him as the building committee chairman for our condominium in downtown, because I'm now on our board. And so I have drafted a charter that I'm submitting to him for him to help me with, and I want him to put his fingerprint on and bring it up to his level before I submit it to our board. And so that's kind of the way that we work, that I'm the board member, I'm the liaison of the board to the committee, I'm on the committee, but in this way, I'm submitting this document for his purview. He's going to put his fingerprint on. It's going to be a collaborative document. It'll have David's, approval on it, but I still wrote the document. It's still the charter that I wrote for our building. And so somehow, some way, we see that kind of a working relationship, that someone who can help us is encouraged and allowed to help us, but we do not surrender our agenda as the church planner. The second one is the coach, and the coach is the one who comes alongside to support. And both today and tomorrow, and then when we come back for part 2 in August, you'll catch more and more our sense of understanding that the coach really is the key person, the key player in all that we're working on and doing together. And so, in a general sense, that's our definition of a coach. Comes alongside to support, and their focus is providing encouragement and confidentiality, normally asking powerful questions, largely based on what the planner wants to work on. And so, the encouragement and confidentiality, your relationship with your coachee needs to be a very private relationship. Now, in some circles, being private means I only share with my best friends. In some cultures, being private means, well, I only share with my wife. In my culture, and in a biblical sense, and in a clinical sense, to be confidential means to be confidential. And you need to exercise some wisdom and discernment about that. But you need a safe relationship with that coachee, so you have greater freedom to speak openly and ask questions about all areas. The focus is normally asking powerful questions, largely based on what the planner wants to work on. So the supervisor provides accountability based on agreed upon goals. That's key. The coach provides encouragement and normally asks questions based on what the planter wants to work on. Okay? And the emphasis is on open-ended questions. The higher the trustworthiness of the planter, the more classical open-ended questions you will ask. The lower the trustworthiness of the planter, the fewer open-ended questions you'll ask, and you'll be a little more directive. And Brian will unpack that the next couple of days. There are some people that you just need to ask them a simple question, the lights go on, they get it, they run off, and they take care of it. I was coaching and working with Kevin Sullivan at High Point Church, and the church was in decline, had declined over 25–30%, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. And so Kevin asked for my input. I took him through natural church development with his team. We got into the assessment, the evaluation, and so forth. They came up with a simple statement of what I thought they were missing, and Kevin just could not believe what was one of his greatest strengths had become one of his greatest weaknesses. And he said, wow, how did this happen? I get it. And then he went off and solved the problem, and the church went from 750 to 850 and then 875 in a matter of months, once he got it. Kevin is a high trust person, and a simple question goes a long way with Kevin. There are other guys that I've coached where an open-ended question is kind of the deer and the headlights, a blank stare. I know that something's wrong, but I don't know what to do, and we have to be a little more helpful. And again, Brian will unpack that, especially as in coaching training number 2. And then the third person is the mentor with current proven skills related to the planter and or the plant. And so the coach doesn't necessarily need to be as competent or as effective or as experienced as the planter himself. But the mentor does need to have proven himself. For example, one of our goals here is to plant not just more churches and more people groups, but to plant more churches that get over 300 in attendance. We have a goal of a few churches running 1,000 or more in attendance, but we want to create a church planting culture that is for both the smaller house church, model, but for the churches that are more gathered churches, for them to get to a size where they truly become self-sustaining. We know how to start churches here. We know how to start churches that get to 50 or 75 here. We do not do a very good job of getting the majority of our churches up over 150 and 250 in attendance here. And I think that the mentor role is one of those roles to say, this is how you get from 75 to 150, this is how you get from 150 to 300. And so the mentor is someone that's proven in some skills that will get the church there. Now in the case of some of us here, where our goal is not to have a large gathering, but to have a network of multiple things, we're looking for mentors who can help you keep multiplying. What we have found globally in church planting movements, that it's hard to get one group or church to multiply into 2, but once you do that, their third and sometimes their fourth multiplication comes pretty easy, but then they're stuck again at 4. And so we want mentors who will take the multiplying cell church model or house church model that know how to take a group from one group to 2 groups and to take 4 groups to 5 or 6 groups. And so the mentor has skill to do that. And so this is where the focus is providing expertise that can be adapted and contextualized, partially based on what the mentor wants to help with, not exclusively, but partially. So you see what's going on here. The supervisor is all encouragement, all upbuilding, all encouraging. The supervisor works with the planter on agreed upon goals that were drafted initially by the planter. The coach is coming alongside to work primarily what the planter wants to work on. The mentor comes along with a expertise, and the mentor gets to set the agenda to say, I'm here to help you deal with this problem that was discovered through your coaching relationship. So it all integrates, it all overlaps and so forth, but we need somebody who's smarter than us, that we respect and trust, who knows enough about us to help us. And then the last is the catalyst. Gary Irby, Brian Harper, and myself are your primary catalysts at this time. We function more in the apostolic role, providing partnerships, resourcing, addressing challenges, and focus. Probably what we best do as catalysts is we have the most objective view, we have the biggest picture, and we're sometimes called in, but we also have the freedom to sometimes call in. You see the difference? Sometimes we're asked for help, but we also feel the freedom to offer help, much like the Apostle Peter and the Apostle John and the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. They didn't come in and take over. They did not sabotage or undermine or rob the agenda, but they were spiritually discerning. They were uniquely gifted to step in and help when things are starting to go awry. And so we find that this kind of a support system provides a planter with everything that a pastor of a church running a couple hundred or larger has built into his church that a planter does not have. This is especially important as we're working with non-English, non-Anglo-American groups and churches, because people who come from other nations are learning and continue to grow in American culture. And this is especially helpful for people that come in from other parts of the nation that need to learn the culture, the DNA here. Patty and I are both native Californians. I'm born and raised Los Angeles Basin. Did my teenage years and engineering career in the Central Valley. San Francisco 9 years, San Diego 13 years. I got the West Coast wired. On the one hand, I was surprised. On the other hand, I wasn't surprised that once I landed here in Seattle, how many months it took me to even understand the language and the dynamics and the culture, not of our churches, but of the people in this area. When a planter comes, I have yet to see one planter convince me that he really understands our culture in less than 2 or 3 years. I've yet to see an exception to that. Those that feel like they are the exception, what they've done is they've understood a slice of it. We've had planters here that have come and found people like them, and there are plenty of Southerners who have been transplanted, plenty of Koreans, plenty of Hispanics have been transplanted, but it takes a long time to really understand the DNA, the culture of the unchurched culture in the greater Puget Sound area. And so that's where this multiple group, this team around the planter can be especially helpful. And so we think it's very, very important. Our partners that we have been discovering lately have been hearing about this model, and we are very, very fortunate. We've never seen anything like this in our history of 10 plus years in Seattle church planting. We've never seen anything like this, where lots of well-resourced partnering churches are coming alongside, and they're just jumping in. They're doing that because of what we got going here. They're doing it because of our respectful and cooperative relationships, both with the other association, with the convention in NAM and the International Mission Board. They're coming because of the systems that we have here, and seeing that we, make sure that people don't, and things don't get dropped too often. They're coming in part now because of this thing right here, saying that I can have a role as an outside supervisor out of state, but there are guys on the field that are functioning as a coach, a mentor, and a catalyst. And so we're finding this to be very, very effective. Eric, you kind of raised a question earlier in response to something that I said, that this is a little harder on some of our longtime planters who got through the system without this. And what our partners are saying is we're here to partner on the basis of this. And so we're of the opinion that every planter needs this, no matter what they've done in the past, no matter what they have been doing. We think that this will make you better. And so we hope that as you are assigned and work out becoming a coach or other coachees, that you'll do this with an understanding of the big picture, and will do this with a commitment to really be a part of a team and work together with the other people, and that you'll coach your coachee to make sure that he has in his meeting with a supervisor and a mentor, and that he'll allow one of the catalysts to be engaged with him as well. So before we turn the page, let me take a breath and talk back to me a little bit. What are you hearing me say? What is this stirring up for you? What do you like? What do you not like? And what you have heard me say so far?
I'm reminded of Ephesians 4:11. When I read that verse, those 5 giftings, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, I see those, I interpret those as leadership gifts for the church. And I think the church needs all of those, because we need different perspectives. We need all of those leadership styles. And I sense a little bit of perhaps designing of this system around that. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but just the idea of creating a support network of people who think and look at life and ministry differently than you do. It's very powerful. That's what I've tried to do with our leadership team in Community Northwest.
Excellent.
And we have a lot of time talking about that. And sometimes it creates conflict because we see things differently.
Right.
But I'm very excited about it.
Cool. Yeah, you caught something very, very key. We as leaders read certain texts of Scripture and say God has added this, that, and the other thing for the people. And so I will accept that I can't do this all on my own, that I need help.
Yeah.
But then Scripture, the intent of Scripture, which is always hard, it's always hard to get out of the text what God meant to say. The Scripture is also stating that the prophet needs the evangelist. The apostle needs the pastor. The pastor needs all the others. And we often miss the fact that when God gave someone to the church as a gift, He gave it to everybody in the church, including the pastor. And we often miss that. It's like, let's bring in a revival preacher or an evangelist or a this or that to help the church. Well, I'm part of the church. I need the help too, and I might need it the most. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so we're not the experts. We are, the humble servants of the church, and we sometimes forget that in our hierarchy roles. Yeah, you picked up on one of the most important things behind all this. You get an A for the first session.
Can a person be, question, can a person be a coach and a mentor, one person?
Yes. It's kind of like what I'm doing right now. I have 3 paid jobs, plus I'm planning a church, plus I do a lot of work and training for the International Mission Board. I'm very much a generalist, but I'm better at some things than I am at other things. And the more things I take on, I ratchet down in my effectiveness and my focus on one thing. So on the one hand, I can say I'm doing a pretty good job in all these areas, and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time I am. But I'm not doing as good a job. Same thing is true in my relationship. If I'm your counselor, I'm going to be less your prophet. And if I'm your prophet, I'm going to be less your friend. Because a prophet gives things that are hard, for the relationship at times. And so we believe that a person can be primarily the coach, but also shift over into a mentoring capacity, and Brian's going to talk about that. Or someone can be primarily the mentor and will often shift over into the coaching. But yeah, for a while there, we were just thinking in terms of coach-mentor, not coach and a mentor. And yet we see the value of it because our goal is for multiplication of cell or house churches, or multiplication of groups that leads you to get to 300 in attendance. And the bigger we think, the more important we believe it is to have a coach and a mentor. But yes, some people are good at both.
I mentioned, I think this in my context of being in a Korean church for so many years, people talk about mentoring, but I felt like being under a senior pastor or being anyone, they've never been mentored. They've read a few books on mentoring and they want to try to be a mentor or coach or whatever capacity, but just haven't seen a healthy model of what, and I guess that's the most intriguing thing about me wanting to be part of this was for me to learn.
Right.
And in a way that as you're teaching, you're coaching us, you and Brian, so that we could share with the leaders in our church and just to pass it down, I think, and just haven't seen a healthy model, a good model.
Well, and I'll pick on my friend Kevin Sullivan again. Kevin Sullivan was under Ed Young at Second Baptist Church in Houston. Great pastor, great church. But Kevin described his relationship with Ed Young the way I described my relationship with Bill Cruz. It was mentoring, but it was mentoring from a distance. And we're talking about close and upfront mentoring as well as coaching. So yeah, I would say that it's new in the last 10 or 15 years. Certainly Bob Logan has helped pioneer this, and our friend David Rees is a very important part of this now too. But this is kind of new, that you should have a mentor and a coach, someone speaking into your life. And so yeah, we're kind of doing this. And one thing that we believe in triad coaching. Brian will talk about that as well. And we're also going to offer mentoring of coaches. And that's one of my roles, is that this training will fully qualify you to be a coach. And then part of what we want to do is support you as coaches by you being part of a coach mentor triad, that I'll probably be the person that helps you with that, so that we keep, you know, developing you and your skills. Because we all know you don't go to seminary and learn how to pastor a church. You don't go to a 3-day training and learn how to be a great coach. You've been introduced on how to start.
Well, I think one interesting thing about this whole introduction of the concept is that oftentimes I think we inadvertently interchange the terminology of mentor, coach, tutor, and all these things kind of all lump sum together, and there's kind of hazy boundaries. And I think while the foundation may be same, just looking at just reading the definition of it, I'm seeing that distinction between supervisor being something initiated, mutually agreed upon. This coach is something that the planter initiates by saying, I need this area of help, can you come and coach me? Mentor sounds like he's initiating, it's like based on what the mentor wants to help with, so he's recognizing and sort of initiating the whole process. And so it kind of gives me a more clarity now, like, okay, we are here specifically to become better equipped coaches, and yet we were mentored by a group of people here who are also catalysts, and so these things are, you know, piecing together a little bit. So it looks like you've taken this general understanding of mentor coaching thing to a little bit next tier or next level of more defined, more specified, you know, areas of how these things actually shape and manifest itself. I mean, just
Yeah, and I think that that's what God has given us, is an understanding of how to take it to the next level. And I really believe it's because of what God has done in shaping our regional staff team. Before Brian got here, we were working in this way. Once Brian got here, he's contributed and shaped and developed it even more. But we've been working for several years on this concept, our strategy philosophy of trustworthiness, you know, based on character, competence, and communication.